For Panam 360, I have the great pleasure to talk with Ciel. Ciel is a multifaceted artist with roots stretching from China to Canada, where she became a key figure in the electronic music scene. DJ, producer, and radio host, Ciel will perform at Mutek on Thursday to present her album Homesick. Hello, Cindy. How are you?
Good. How are you? Hi. Thanks for having me.
And thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me today. So you define yourself as first a DJ, then a producer. I know that you've been producing for a few years now, and you are a pianist as well. I want to know if you want to create like a very unique space.
I've just always been interested in lots of different things. Have a hard time sort of just picking one thing to do, and I think that really impacts sort of how I create as well. You know, my music is, I consider myself an open genre DJ. Most of my DJ sets when I, play in Montreal or in Toronto, abroad, are club ready sets, but I also run a down tempo night. And, while I do play like club music, but I also play non-club music, and the works that I create are a reflection of who I am as a person. And, I do think I have different skills for different situations. I used to do a lot of parties in Toronto. That's kind of how I sort of broke into the scene as a promoter slash DJ. I don't really do events anymore because of my schedule. I think at the time when I, was living in Toronto, I felt like the scene really needed a makeover. It was a lot of sort of very predictable, expected bookings, very safe, and very not diverse, very male dominated. So I felt like that situation just sort of um, needed someone to fill that space, and I kind of took advantage of that, took the opportunity, and it found an audience very quickly. I'm into I've done so many things in music. I was a sort of traditionally trained pianist, but I also worked in community radio since I was 18. So it made sense to do more radio. And that was how I entered kind of DJing as a radio DJ.
Okay, I see. Very interesting. Now, as a producer, I know that Homesick is your first long musical scenario that you compose with nine pieces on your label Parallel Minds. You produced before a lot, but that's the long one. And you composed this album during the COVID pandemic that you want to transform hatred into beauty. I found this amazing. And I've seen also that you asked to some traditional Chinese musician to participate. How did everything come together?
I think it kind of came together exactly as so for my album, like to begin with, I never really thought I had um, the skill set, the technique, the focus to really do an entire full-length album. It wasn't until the lockdowns kind of like ended everything that I could even think about, what do I even want to say if I were to write an album? And kind of the situation also necessitated things like, I mean, I don't know if this was mentioned, but I applied for Canada Arts Council grant funding. In a way, writing the grant actually laid out my plan perfectly for the album, because from the very early stages, because I wrote my grant in 2021, but I wrote my album a year later in 2022, and I actually would refer to the grant application and sort of like the concepts that I laid out very clearly when I was working on my album, including hiring instrumentalists, buying some smaller instruments so I could learn to play them myself, renting a studio. For the first time I had money to work with for this kind of stuff. And it was honestly, I really cherished the experience, and I really cherished the lockdowns, weirdly, that it gave me the opportunity and the time to do
Yeah.
this. And that time off for the whole industry. And it felt a lot less pressure because when everything's back, on or whatever, there is a lot of pressure to, I'm often trying to decide between what is more important to me, production or DJing. DJing pays the bills, but production makes me feel more fulfilled mentally. Also the lockdowns, which were caused by the pandemic, which also yielded all of those very toxic things that were very inescapable on the internet, and we were spending a lot of time on the internet. And I felt a lot of pain and frustration. I cried a lot in 2020 and 2021, just like every day logging on the internet, seeing people call, just, that we're dirty, that we carry disease and stuff like that. And how like it became like you couldn't even see or say anything about even the word China without it kind of going into this very negative place. And
Yeah.
I felt like there was nothing from my culture that was really celebrated, that I could take pride in. And even like something like music, which is so innocuous, and really kind of separate from all of that, it could still be impacted and be politicized and all of that. And I really kind of wanted to take something that had been really, really ugly and turn it into something positive, where like I could, publicly be proud of where I'm from, publicly be proud of my culture, kind of, how what my parents taught me about Chinese music, how that influenced me as a musician today. I wanted to sort of spotlight that instead. And I think I do want to thank, the Canada Arts Council for giving me grant funding. That really helped me. But also, it really helped me sort of focus my idea and really stick to the plan. That helps so much.
Yeah, for sure. People, they were like very mean at this time.
Yeah, not just from China. My father is from Wuhan.
Okay, thank you for sharing this detail.
Yeah,
You did an amazing work with a Homesick, and you're
thank
gonna
you.
play live for Mutek. And I want to know for your performance on Thursday, how will you approach your performance following the long studio session that you had with some musicians? What will your setup be like?
Well, my setup, I kind of, when I first started thinking about turning my album to a live set, was like, I had really essentially like two choices, as a live performer, which I think you can opt to be as faithful to the album as possible and just perform it live with instrumentalists, and where like part of what's impressive about the performance is sort of incorporating these live instruments and sort of the the complicated setup of being able to incorporate all of that in a live setting versus something that's a bit more streamlined, simple, but readapts the album for a club oriented dance floor. And I thought about this long and hard. I think of myself very much as a studio producer first and foremost. Playing live, I've done it a few times. I would not say that that's my forte. My forte is studio work, making music in the studio where I could obsess over something for forever. I like that, and so like I kind of decided that my album, it is open genre. There's tempos that range from like 90 to 160. And I thought, maybe that would be a bit jarring, or maybe it would be uninteresting. Like I personally don't want to go see someone just play something verbatim. Like I want to see someone like rework it for a different context, because Homesick is an album to listen to, on your record player, on your phone or whatever. It's not necessarily something for, club like nightclubs. And I thought I decided to do option two because I do have to travel with this live setup. I will play this in South America as well. And like, and playing it abroad, I didn't want to have to think about, am I going to bring like all these things with me and risk there being tech issues when I play live. Even with a simple setup, there are tech issues. So I ultimately decided to rework my album. where I kind of, it definitely sounds like my album. I don't want to be like it's my album, but it sounds totally different. No, you definitely will recognize every single track, but I rewrote all of the drums and I essentially tried to make something that was groovier and more sort of driving and something that, will kind of really get people moving on a consistent like level throughout the because like this is not my first live set for Mutek. My first one was in 2021, and back then people couldn't dance, so I have yet to play for Mutek where people could dance. So I really wanted to take advantage of that and give people something that is really pumping and fun and like
Okay, so my last question is about your label, Parallel Minds. Can you give us an overview, upcoming projects?
basically just like a very short intro. Parallel Minds is a label that I started with my friend Daniel 58 in Toronto back in 2018, and it was basically started as a reaction to the lack of labels from Toronto. Toronto, we're a big city, big scene, lots of DJs, but there aren't really any like notable labels, at least when we started. And I wanted to give a platform to Toronto producers who might not be able to access international markets. So we've done 5 releases so far, actually technically 6 because we released a digital only thing during the pandemic. But I think right now we're working on the next 2 releases. We pretty much have the demos picked out for the next release, and all we are sort of trying to figure out is like how to disseminate it, how we're going to um, you know like put it out, because the landscape for vinyl is changing very rapidly, and especially if your distribution is based in Europe, where the change is happening in the most visible way. It's definitely changing kind of how we distribute our label, the music that we put out. So we have to be a bit more creative about how we're kind of gonna deal with these changes. And so we're kind of in this bit of a crossroad right now, but we do have the next 2 releases confirmed. It's just trying to figure out like what that's gonna look like and when that's gonna be. Basically, we have to switch distribution from Europe to home, because now it used to be that European vinyl manufacturing was cheaper than here, but now actually it's cheaper in Canada. Actually, probably the best place to manufacture vinyl right now is in Canada. So there is, that's a pretty big change and shift. And, it's not very sexy to talk about that stuff. I know the music stuff is more interesting, but just to give you an idea of like the style, I definitely think the next one is going to be like a very kind of bass oriented, like a lot of our past releases. And the one after that will probably be a dub techno, because I'm obsessed with dub techno, so we want to put more of that out for sure. Yeah.
Oh, well, sounds great. Well, Cindy, thank you so much
Thank you.
for taking the time to be with us. And I wish you good luck
Thank
for
you.
Thursday, and I'll be there.
Yeah, well, I'll see you and I'll see hopefully the viewers on Thursday at is it SAT? Yes, at SAT for Nocturne.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.